Good evening, visitors, boys and girls. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraft woman Kim van der Vloot. We're honoured to acknowledge NATO military delegation who are joining us this evening, Commander John Capel from the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers, Europe. We also acknowledge the members of the Naval Association Australia. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and by students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Green Valley Public School. From Queensland, Mackay North State School. From the Australian Capital Territory, the International Air Cadet Exchange. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. School students, you may now be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this National Memorial and Museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Ordinary Seaman Daniel Buckley and the ship's company of HMAS Sydney II, who were lost after engaging the German surface raider Cormoran in 1941. A modified Leander-class light cruiser, Sydney was armed with 8 6-inch guns and was the pride of the Royal Australian Navy. Built in England, the cruiser was commissioned into the Royal Australian Navy in 1935, with a mixture of ages, levels of experiences on board. Daniel Stanley Buckley was born on the 21st of June 1920 in the Melbourne suburb of Carlton, Victoria, the youngest child of John and Annie Buckley. His father, John, had served in the artillery on the Western Front during the Great War. Little is known about Daniel Buckley's early life, but following the outbreak of the Second World War, the 20-year-old enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy on the 30th of December 1940. Buckley was first posted to the training establishment HMAS Lonsdale in Port Melbourne with the rating of Ordinary Seaman. At the end of January 1941, he was posted to HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's training establishment some 70 kilometres south of Melbourne on Western Port Bay. He remained at Cerberus for just under 6 months. Towards the end of June 1941, Buckley was posted to HMAS Cuttable. The converted ferry was used as a depot ship to the naval base at Garden Island, Sydney Harbour, New South Wales. After 2 months living and training in the city of Sydney, Buckley was posted to the cruiser Sydney on the 28th of August. Following the outbreak of war, Sydney was one of several Australian warships sent to the Mediterranean, where it had demonstrated its fighting prowess, sinking the Italian cruiser Bartholomew Caloni in the Battle of Cape Sparta on the 19th of July 1940. In February 1941, Sydney returned home to where it received a hero's welcome. For much of the year, the cruiser was engaged in escort duties that took the cruiser to the Netherlands, East Indies, Singapore, Noumea, Auckland, Suva, before returning to Western Australian waters. On the 19th of November, Sydney was steaming back to Fremantle, having escorted a troop ship part of the way to Singapore. About 4 p.m, the cruiser spotted a suspicious merchant ship and decided to investigate. By 5:30 p.m, Sydney had almost drawn alongside the vessel when it suddenly revealed its true identity as a German raider. Hoisting its German naval ensign, Cormoran fired its guns and torpedoes. Its first salvo slammed into Sydney's bridge. The Australian cruiser returned fire, but the raider's second and third salvos again hit Sydney's bridge and amidships. Its 3 main turrets were soon out of action, but a fourth kept up fast, an accurate fire that hit Cormoran's funnel and engine room. Sydney, in turn, was hit by a torpedo between turrets. Mortally damaged and ablaze, Sydney turned away from the raider, continuing to fight using its secondary armament and torpedoes. Cormoran was also burning. At 6:25 p.m, its captain gave the order to abandon ship. As the German sailors evacuated their stricken vessel, they watched the Australian cruiser, now only a distant glow on the dark horizon, disappear into the night. By midnight, Sydney was gone, lost with all 645 hands, including Ordinary Seaman Daniel Buckley. He was 21 years old. Today, Daniel Buckley is commemorated on the Plymouth Naval Memorial in Britain. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Ordinary Seaman Daniel Stanley Buckley, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no graves but the cruel sea. No flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you a good evening.